Hi, this is Kasian, and it's time for our weekly conference call at VectorspaceAI. We'll start with what's happening around the world. First, Ingenuity has had its first flight, and then it had its second flight today. This is the Mars aerial vehicle that's taking off and surveying the land and the air on Mars. This is the first for human history. There's been a strong second wave of the virus in India, and the world is paying attention to that. The world is also paying attention to a chip shortage. This has been happening for quite some time, based on supply chain issues, primarily based on the pandemic. And when you have a chip shortage like this, as it's getting more intense or increasing, you'll notice that certain suppliers stop manufacturing certain goods and products, which is happening now. BTC is trading at 49K, and ETH is at 2200, and the Dow is at 33.7. On the industry side, Russia and China are building a new space station. And a quote from the Financial Times: China and Russia have signed a deal to build a moon base together as they seek to rival the US in orbit on the moon and beyond. SpaceX Crew 2, their flight's delayed until tomorrow. They were supposed to launch, I think, today. NASA's Perseverance Mars rover extracts the first oxygen from the red planet. That just happened today. And then we've got an AI headline: why AI that teaches itself to achieve a goal is the next big thing. That's from the Harvard Business Review. That's an article worth looking at. We've always held that view. Cerebras launches a new AI supercomputing processor with 2.6 trillion transistors. Artificial intelligence looks for a language of cancer and Alzheimer's. Researchers use machine learning to look for a biological language for disease in protein sequences. And of course, that connects to the core of what we do: language modeling and datasets. Under themes and events, ESG continues to be a strong theme, and the SPAC implosion, special purpose acquisition vehicles. The SPAC implosion is based on too many SPACs being floated in the market, and now there's a big retrace happening across the board. And then on the corp side, we have got a few interviews happening related to operations, and on the legal side, we're ramping up legal strategies, and that's primarily due to the process of due diligence that we'll be going through with a few groups out there. And when you go through a process of due diligence, this really means that you might have another suitor or another organization looking at the company in terms of due diligence related to the team, the technology, the strategy, and of course the corporate structure, cap table, and so forth. So we want to make sure all our I's are dotted and T's crossed. And we're also modifying our executive summary to include recent strategy. On the engineering, product, QA, and ops side, we had our engineering call recently, and I'll just go over what we went through on that call to give you a good summary of what's going on here. CoinMetro, we're still waiting on them, and they should get back to us in a week or so with a new technical lead that's available. S&P, our engineers are waiting on the agreements, and they have sent the agreements. We'll provide updates on that in just a bit. And of course, we can't do anything with CloudQuant until the S&P thing is done. On the GNC side, we can't do anything with GNC until we have our precision medicine, personalized medicine, and nutrigenomics intersection happening with our space biosciences efforts. And then we've got our 10 funds that we were talking to, 10 plus funds. And we've got stage 1 funds and stage 2 funds. Some of them have gotten back to us. We will cover that in our customers, partners, and collaborators section, though. In terms of the engineering, in the context of engineering, These funds are looking for mainly API access, but at the same time, we might have to drop datasets to various locations. We'll figure it out. Engineering is also being prepared to roll out data engineering pipelines on Azure Space. And engineering is getting familiar with bioinformatics and the future of bioinformatics, along with understanding the kinds of data sets we'll be working on related to human cells in a tissue type and all the attributes you can associate to a cell. And then, of course, Facebook released a headline that connects directly to our engineering efforts, which is kind of rare. AI predicts effective drug combinations to fight complex diseases faster. So Facebook is using a language model. They have an AI department, of course, as everyone knows, and they are doing all kinds of interesting things in AI, and one of them is using language models to determine if they can understand what combination of drugs in a drug cocktail can be used to fight a disease. So that's excellent work on their part. We're following what they're doing. They understand, like many, that NLP, NLU, and NLG is the tip of the spear in AI and machine learning. This is where the discoveries are being made, and this is how they're being made, with language models that are predicting hidden relationships between drugs and diseases and everything else. And then, of course, we talked about Linguamatics. Linguamatics is a company that's engaged in drug discovery related to analyzing clinical trials, language surrounding clinical trials, and understanding which drugs hold some kind of efficacy that ordinarily wouldn't. And our engineers are looking at Linguamatics. And then, of course, Bertology. Bertollogy. Bertology. As many of you already know, BERT is a language model. It runs most of Google services today. It's an NLG-based language model. And Bertology is a way for this language model to be applied to understanding how proteins fold, understanding which amino acid sequences result in which structures of a protein. Language models are being used all over the place, and primarily in biology. Looking at a comp matrix of companies that are doing what we're doing is also something we talked about in engineering. And we also talked about the fact that our engineering group is not just made up of engineers. These are not just software engineers. These are data scientists as well, data miners, and data engineers. And as straddling the scientific area requires the design and the running of experiments, as opposed to quality assurance and testing, which is what standard software engineering practice involves. Most software engineers understand what it means to engage in quality and QA and testing and regression testing, integration testing, and all that good stuff. In fact, even testing for relevance, precision, and accuracy. However, when we find new relationships in literature based on language models, that might require an experiment to be run, or it might require a dry lab experiment to be run over a data engineering pipeline, or a wet lab experiment to be run to validate a relationship. We also talked about the fact that we're not dealing with just language models, but we're dealing with object models and symbol models, because we primarily do not treat symbols or words as objects. We treat objects as words. We first look at things as symbols or objects, and secondarily we look at them as terms or words. And this really just means that language models can be applied to any sequence that you can, any object that you can chop up into a sequence, or any sequence of anything. We also talked about the build out of our bioinformatics internal team. And And on another note, a separate note, we have a new site design, and this would be a new build iteration, a new site design and build iteration happening. We've been talking about this for a few weeks. We are going to integrate a few strategic decisions related to directions of this company, directions we're going in this company. We want those reflected on the site, so we're working those in. Under customers, partners, and collaborators, within the financial category, we've got S&P. That's our primary concern now, is getting these agreements done with them. We have them in hand. They've been given to us, and we're signing them. They enable access to rich company descriptions. These are long descriptions of companies. We operate in human language, so that's what we want. Long descriptions of human language related to any public companies. They also are offering key developments. We'll be getting key developments. These are key events or new pieces of news, headlines that have affected a company's history. And then, of course, transcripted conference calls. And as mentioned, we have the agreements, so we'll be sending them back as soon as we can, probably tomorrow. And this connects to the 10 funds that we're talking to, 10 plus funds. We have got to make sure that we have S&P in place, the agreements in place, before we deliver any trial to any of the 10 funds. The reason for that is some of these funds have told us that they already have licensing agreements with S&P for S&P data. But as we talked with S&P said, well, even if they did have licenses, they're going to need to get additional seats. So we are acting as a liaison and proxying a bit of that communication between the two. That's okay. We're used to doing that. That's normal. We had a second meeting with Morgan Stanley on Monday, and they scheduled this meeting in the morning, early in the morning, and that meeting went very well. They wanted to collect more details related to how they can get on the trial and what we were offering, and they wanted us to explain to another group that they had on the call this time related to how they can integrate a signal for customers that they have. They have institutional customers, and they'd like to redistribute signal. We can't go into too many details because we have to limit the amount of details that we share as we move deeper into these relationships. That should be obvious based on confidentiality arrangements and anything related to the proprietary nature of what they're doing. We have others that are in process. These are groups that have told us they're going to get back to us in a week or so after they meet with other internals. Under the Space Biosciences category, we've got Biorad as a company that we'll be talking with. As some of you already know, Raf Podowski, our Chief Scientific Officer, heads up data science over at Biorad, and we'll be talking more about that later. We're continuing to build out our SAB, our Scientific Advisory Board, and visualization AR and XR. And for visualization AR, which is augmented reality, and XR, which is extended reality, we'll be building out an introductory visualization of what we do with our data sets, how they can be used to generate new hypotheses or make discoveries, make predictions. We're also going to be producing a visualization that explains what happens when radiation travels through the human body and breaks your DNA, and how your DNA is repaired, how your body uses mechanisms to repair DNA, along with all the proteins and the enzymes and the genes that are used. So we're going to display how our bodies are currently being repaired and how they can be repaired based on analyzing the literature and understanding relationships and validating new discoveries that can be made based on anything from drug cocktails to micronutrients to nutrigenomics. Anything that can speed up the repair of and the protection and repair of human DNA and tissue regeneration. Under the sales and marketing side, that's in process, and under IR, PR, and Marcom, that's all in process. exchanges also in process, and questions from the trader base. First, we'll start with last week's questions. The first is, what work needs to be done for a large company to start using the services of VectorspaceAI? Is it mainly engineering work, such as integrating each other's APIs or consuming their private data? Or is it some other type of work, for example, legal? Would be nice to know what it looks like working in the trenches on these things. Well, we can't share too many details, but we'll share as many as we can. And when you look at establishing a partnership or a relationship between two companies where both are benefiting one another, maybe you've got a cross-API licensing agreement or a joint development agreement or a feasibility study or something like that, what you do is you begin to understand that there's more than just the technology involved. There are relationships involved. There are people that are going on vacation. There are technical leads not available, and sometimes they are. There are big companies and groups that operate differently than small companies and groups within them. And there are legal aspects. And all of these things, all of these things represent moving parts, and there are hundreds of moving parts here. So not everything can operate in sync at the same time, but we do have to operate at least in parity with engineering, which is what we always mention. The next question is, where do you see the crypto market evolve in the next months? Will we see a big crash of BTC and related assets, or will valuations go ever higher? Up. One word. There is a lot more upside than downside, and I think many realize that today. The world has yet to adopt crypto. And the world has yet to even understand what a true global capital marketplace is, which is crypto. The world has yet to understand, most of the world has yet to understand, you don't need to buy a whole Bitcoin, or that you don't need to have a bank account, or that you don't need to be an accredited investor with millions of dollars in the bank. The world is beginning to understand that crypto is the best place you can position your money for a lot of people, the best asset class. And this kind of connects to the next question. How do you see gold and silver compared to crypto? But no competition. The next question is, I had a question on protocol design with Binance Smart Chain and Avalanche as two example protocols that solve the scaling issues of ERC20 tokens. Are you starting to explore transacting on these protocols? No, we're not. We'll roll our own chain. We don't need to transact on those protocols. We have very acute data needs and data security needs and needs related to data provenance and lineage. That first takes an understanding of a data set, a correlation matrix data set, to produce any kind of protocol worthwhile that will handle true provenance. Can you please share an update on the team recruitment? I see a couple of trader quant analyst opportunities. I was wondering if that would be perceived as being competitive to hedge funds you plan to do business with. Oh yes, it is competitive. We're all competitive. And hedge funds compete with hedge funds. Hedge funds compete with data providers. Data providers compete with data providers. That's just the way that it works. Now we can move on to this week's questions. The first is, Space Biosciences is extremely exciting to me, and I'm glad you are partnering with some of the best researchers in the world. However, as stated also by occasion previously, life sciences is slow in generating revenue. It may take a while. For example, BioNTech took decades to become a big success. Where does the team see monetizing their efforts in space biosciences, especially since it's a new field with not much public awareness? Well, that's exactly why we're doing it, because the public is not aware of the opportunity. And the public may not be aware of a few other things. For example, number one, we've had a pandemic, and trillions have been allocated to life sciences. This has shortened sales cycles drastically. Things have changed. And two, we're in a new space race. This has also shortened sales cycles and drastically increased funding. Number 3, government contracts for space biosciences are opening up every day. And of course, number 4, language models applied to biology are enabling discoveries. We specialize in language models. We specialize in space biosciences. We specialize in discoveries being made using language models that are used to produce data sets that make these predictions. Space biosciences is at the intersection of all of this. And more will be put into space biosciences than most any other industry in human history. We're a company that produces data sets that enable predictions, new hypotheses, and discoveries. And this applies to all industries. It's our responsibility to stakeholders to capture opportunities we're capable of executing on. Our area of expertise are in the financial markets and space biosciences. We've been told by multiple sources that today's space companies are putting the cart before the horse. The next question is, how many in the team have we got now, including any new roles that have since been taken from the job advertisements on the Vectorspace site, and what is the monthly cash burn? Okay, so we have about 20, and our monthly cash burn is a little less than 100K per month. The next question is, question on the mechanics of VXV and datasets. I understand that the team is used primarily, or that the token is used primarily on updating of datasets. But still don't understand what Deep Hedge means in his calls and interviews when he says some of these datasets are worth millions and billions of dollars. Well, this is an easy one. How much would you pay for $1? 25 cents? 50 cents? 90 cents? Of course you would. How much would you pay for a data set that made $10 million a month for you? Would you pay $2 million? That's 20%. You probably would. Most funds will. The next question is, I understand the subscription-based 99 cents per update. Actually, let me answer something else related to that last question. Part of the question said, I understand that the token is used primarily on the updating of datasets. The token is primarily used to ensure dataset security, provenance, lineage, and governance. If your dataset is corrupt or has been modified by some malicious actor somewhere, you're going to not have good results. Your predictions are going to be off. They may be off based on some kind of malicious intent from a group that might want to alter your dataset to their advantage. This is what's happening today. This is called an attack vector, and this is what we protect against by creating hashes of hashes on chain for every change related to your dataset. So that's primarily what VXV is used for. Secondarily, to of course access these datasets with the wallet-enabled API key. The next question is, do you mean that you have to purchase the dataset directly on the open market using VXV? Okay, so this is described in our doc. We have a combined fiat crypto gateway that's described. The next question is, and when you purchase it, you have sole ownership of it, or is it like paying to subscribe to a dataset? Okay, that's also described in our doc. Multiple entities can own a dataset. The next question is, who creates the dataset? This is also described in our doc. We guide the customer through the design process of the dataset, choosing which data sources, which row types, which column types, which context controls, and how often they want the updates, each 99 cents, at 99 cents. Who determines the ownership of the dataset? That's the next question here. The answer is whoever pays for it. The next question is, what happens when, say, I don't want any more access to the dataset? Okay, so you can get rid of your VXV on the open market. We'd prefer that you sell it back to us. And we have a rhetorical question here. How much is a dataset worth, which powers AI and ML systems in any industry, resulting in a new drug discovery for a disease related to human longevity? How much is that dataset worth? What about a dataset that provides real-time generation of thematic baskets of stocks and cryptos based on known and hidden relationships to global events, with returns of 67% on the long side and 80% on the short side? Or, how much is a dataset worth that sells for $10 million outright? Here's a quote. $10 million for a dataset might seem like a lot, but if you spend $10 million to make 100, if you can spend 10 million to make 100, 10 million suddenly doesn't seem like a lot. So if you can spend 10 million to make 100 million, 10 million suddenly doesn't seem like a lot of money anymore, unquote. You can find that article in our channel. Next, we'll move on to the strategy section. We've been in contact with certain scientists involved with space biosciences. What we're trying to do is collect the leading edge or the most advanced research happening right now in space biosciences. And part of that involves a few job recs, posting a few job requisitions. We'll have those posted next week on our site. And some of these relate to, let me just pull a few of these up here. We are looking for people that have familiarity with language models, in particular molecular and cellular biology focused language models. And of course, data sets that are used for unsupervised learning and clustering. And anyone familiar with the latest in bioinformatics tool sets. Computational proteomics and those that have experience with computational genomics, computational biology, computational neuroscience, computational cognition, computational linguistics, visualization and data interpretation on the AR and XR side, precision medicine and personalized medicine, radiation and energy, GCR, HCE, LET, LDIR radiation, zero-point energy, and of course brain ECM, microenvironments, dynamic reciprocity, exosomes, dormancy, DTCs, spreading, vasculature, DNA repair, epigenomics, microbiomics, nutrigenomics, and multiomic pathway analysis, along with single-cell sequencing, nanomedicine, material sciences, and of course the Linux command line, Python, R, MATLAB, Mathematica, S, S+, or TCL. Meanwhile, the lab wants us to produce an informal preliminary one-page description mapping out what our specific aims are and what they'll be in space biosciences, what we plan to accomplish, what we intend to accomplish, what we think should be accomplished, and precisely how we're going to do that. It's likely going to intersect with things that they're working on as well, and things that we've worked on in the past. We'll also talk about what we'll need from the various labs, from biosciences to nanotech. And Raf and I, Raf Badowski, our Chief Scientific Officer, are working on gathering information from Mina and Eleanor Blakely, related to, number one, explaining what our aim is, being, number one, supporting the efforts of leading scientists involved in advancing the basic research by speeding up the process of discovery. And of course, this will lead to new and faster cures for diseases and repair with human tissue. Number two, our aim is to attract a healthy amount of funding and contracts from the government's space budget. And number three, develop platforms and products that can be licensed or sold to all other industries. This is usually what government proposals look for, is commercialization, technology transfer that you can engage in when it comes to being funded by government contracts or grants. And of course, that's also a form of revenue and profit. And then number four, our aim is to combine novel scientific advancements with computational NLP and NLU language modeling, data engineering, AI, ML, AR/XR and visualization as the foundation for new discoveries. After we spend a few more days in research mode, we'll be ready to deliver this one-page description to the lab. And Raf is also heading up data science at Biorad. And Biorad is a company that supplies all kinds of equipment to wet labs and pharmaceutical companies, biotechs around the world. They also supply products to national labs, including Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. They also supply intelligence on scientific publications, and this is something that we'll be working closely with them on. Raf and I also had a discussion on architecting a plan which would involve Biorad, where we are building out wet labs that are similar in some respects to LBNLs and LLNLs, Lawrence Livermore National Lab. Meanwhile, Raf is reviewing papers from Eleanor's lab, and will be leading the effort with LBNL to assemble everything that's needed, from pricing to scheduling to equipment orders for the dry lab on the bioinformatics side and the wet lab. By Monday, we'll be ready to submit the one-pager, and after that, they'll likely provide guidance and modification to the plan. The lab may take a stake in the company, as they have before. When it comes to space biosciences, some might ask, are we early? We initially thought, well, we might be a little early, but now we've decided that we are not early whatsoever. There are new space companies sprouting up every day, and their launch is happening every day. Tomorrow, there will be humans put in space for 5 months, and this is happening around the world. The space effort and the space race is in full bore, and as we've mentioned, there have been others in certain academic circles and other circles that have said that the cart is being put before the horse when it comes to the advancements in space right now. Space biosciences is required for humans to be in space, and right now the government and the world, governments of the world, in fact, are looking at space biosciences as the way forward. It's also a way for us to make the largest possible impact, and for a very long time, which will include generating more than enough funding to move all efforts forward in the largest possible way at VectorspaceAI. So we'll continue to maintain a laser-like focus on the quickest path to consequential revenue, with the largest long-term gains and positive impact. This has been a pre-recorded call. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to post them online. Thanks for joining.